Aloha mai kako. My name is Kainoa Danes, Director of Culture and Product Development at the Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau. The Hawaiian culture is the foundation of these islands, and it is our kuleana, our responsibility to know, understand, and share it correctly. Mahalo for joining us as we explore the important aspects of the culture, language, guiding principles and values, and how best we can incorporate and appreciate them in our daily lives. At the Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau, our focus is to enrich Hawaii and its people by attracting visitors who will leave this place better than when they arrived. As a member of the HVCB, we invite you to join us in that mission, join us on that journey. Welcome and mahalo for taking this cultural training.
Ano ai ko kākou mea hoki palaia. A me nā mea hano, e ho'o hiwa ia nei mā pulaia. E ahi pu'u ia kākou I ka lokahi, ka nalu I mea kākou mai ka hiki mai laia. Me ke alo hano kākou a pau. Aloha mai kako. My name is Kainoa Danes, Director of Culture and Product Development at the Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau. Previous to my current role, I was Director of Sales for the Oahu Visitors Bureau for a combined total at HVCB for a little over 9 years. Prior to that, at the Queen Kapiolani Hotel. Before that, the Miramar at Waikiki. Once upon Fun Sun Vacations, and before that, at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas. So my professional background summarized in a few bullet points, but my cultural background is a little more in-depth and extensive, going all the way back to as a child, growing up around loved ones, aunties and uncles, sharing their mana'o, their ike. A very active member today of the Royal Order of Kamehameha Ikahi, active and involved with the Iolani Palace, King Kamehameha celebration festivities, a proud student of Kumuhula Kahi Tapalinski and Kapahula Hawaii, and a former board member and certified cultural trainer with the Native Hawaiian Hospitality Association. What we're going to be learning today are things that were taught to me by my teachers. You may have learned things a little bit different, but keep in mind during the training to keep an open heart, an open mind. All knowledge is certainly not taught in the same school, so there's a lot of room for interpretation, but what we're looking at here is a level of consistency across the industry. So you will have an opportunity to ask questions later, but we do ask that you keep an open mind, an open heart, and perhaps in the future be able to contribute to some of this education with us. Welcome again officially to Ōlelo Hawaii, Papa Ōlelo Hawaii Hawaiian Language 101. We're going to be covering some basics about the Hawaiian language. We're going to be covering the origins of the Hawaiian language, transforming it from an oral tradition to one written on paper, pronunciation of Hawaiian words, place names, etc. Usage, when and how to use Hawaiian words, best practices, phrases that you can use in your daily life, and the practice of giving Hawaiian names, when to and when not to. So this gentleman here, Opukahaia, was born in the late 1700s, and he lived at a time when Kamehameha the Great was conquesting, unifying the island of Hawaii, and Opukahaia's family was, for lack of a better description, on the losing side of those battles. And so in the year about 1807, he left with several of his friends, countrymen, Hawaiians, to leave Hawaii and look for better fortunes in the world. So it took them about 6 months or so. They made their way circumnavigating around the globe to the United States of America, to New England. And it was there that he discovered Christianity. You have to consider the time when he left, Hawaii was still bound by the kapu system, and the Hawaiian religion, the Hawaiian ways were still being practiced. And so when he got to New England, he discovered and converted to Christianity in 1815. And it was he who, in conversation with the American Board of Foreign Missions, who paved the way for a mission to be sent to Hawaii to share the gospel and the teachings of Christianity, and also bringing with them the written word. Again, prior to that, the Hawaiian language was only passed down orally. There was nothing written down on paper. And again, that's where hula comes from. Oli, mo'olelo, or stories. A lot of these epic battles, genealogies, love stories were all passed down from father to son, mother to daughter, kumu to teacher to student. And so it was this being the goal of the missionaries, to bring with them the written word, to share more about Christianity. So with Opukahi'ia's guidance and some assistance, the missionaries arrived from New England in 1820. Again, showing up in Hawaii with one goal, to teach Hawaiians about the Lord, if you will, Christianity. And so to take this oral tradition, they had to, with the assistance of the Hawaiian people, take a language that was only spoken and put it onto paper so they could print a book. And you could probably guess what book that was. It's referred to today as the Holy Bible. So Elijah Loomis was on one of those early arrivals, and he brought with him the printing press and was able to transform the Hawaiian language with assistance again from the Li'i, the missionaries, using these Bostonian ears, listening to the dialect and tongue of the Polynesian people, the Hawaiian people, and transforming it into a written language. And so through the printing press, we saw over 1,000 schools across the Hawaiian Islands that had access to these primers, to these little Hawaiian language lessons, and everyone was very eager, so eager to learn the Hawaiian language. And we see that there, the literacy rate nationwide, 91 to 95% of people in these islands, this is a nationwide poll, were literate. I believe at the time, a statistics I once heard from the Hawaiian Mission Houses Museum was that Hawaii was second only in the world to Scotland in literacy levels. Amazing to think that a little nation in the middle of the Pacific Ocean had such a high literacy rate. And that same year, Kalama Hawaii was the very first newspaper printed west of the Rocky Mountains. Quite the accomplishment. But over the next several years, over the next over 10, 12 years, over 100 Hawaiian language newspapers. So Hawaii really embraced the Hawaiian language and took it to that next level. And so that's what we're going to be learning more about during this session together. A lot of what you're going to be seeing in today's Hawaiian language presentation, if you will, is an opportunity to pause the training or take a screenshot so you can take a minute and read a little bit more. We won't read in too much detail, but I wanted to just share some history of the language and its evolution again as it evolved into what the language is that we know today. So in the late 1800s, the Hawaiian language was actually banned and everything was shifted to English. And then thank goodness in the late 1970s, took a little while, but Hawaiian language was brought back to the forefront and made an official language equal to English. Because they were Bostonian Americans speaking English, the letters of the Hawaiian language are English letters, if you will, but the pronunciation is a little bit different. And that's the key here. If you can pronounce Hawaiian words, pronounce the Hawaiian pronunciation, the vowels, for example, you'll be able to pronounce any Hawaiian word. So here we have the Hawaiian alphabet, kapia, pa, the alphabet. So the vowels, very consistent, a, e, o, u, and I know you're taking this on a computer somewhere, but do it with me together, will you? A, e, o, u. So same vowels, no problem, but the pronunciation again very consistent. As with many Romantic and Asian languages, the vowels are generally always consistently the same. English is one of the few languages where the vowels can be different. The consonants that were chosen were, again, the oral language. The committee at this point, the official committee was King Kamehameha III, some of his chiefs and several of the missionaries who sat down and began discussing which consonants would make it. So H, K, L, M, N, P, W, and the glottal stop or okina are all consonants in the Hawaiian language. H, no problem, but the K and T sound were interchangeable, so the K was chosen over the T. The L, the La and Ra, the rolling R. So L and L were interchangeable once upon a time in the oral language, and it was all about context. The L was chosen. M and N, no problem, but the P, the P and Ba were interchangeable at one time. The P was selected. The V and the W, that was in some ways a bit of a challenge. Certain Hawaiian words you use the V sound, certain words you use the W sound. For this one, what I want to just share real briefly is if it's in the beginning of a place name, oftentimes it's a W, and if it's in the middle of a place name, oftentimes it's a V. But there were different dialects and different, again, Aohe Pauka Ike Kahala Ho'okahi, the language was spoken by different areas, by different Ahupua'a, different Moku, different islands, so it's not necessarily a hard and fast rule, and we'll cover more about the Okina shortly. Now we're going to take it back a little more preschool style. So these are a primer called the Hakalama that is taught to the Punana Leo students, the Hawaiian language immersion schools here in Hawaii. Simply a pronunciation. So now we're combining consonants and vowels to form syllables, and syllables together form words. And so right now we're just practicing sounds. And while you're practicing the sounds, I'd like you to think about what your mouth is doing as you're pronouncing ah, e, o, u. Yeah, just think about that. So we're going to do the first column together. We'll do all the columns together, and I want you to, we'll do it slowly and think about the sounds of the vowels as you're pronouncing them. Ready? Ha, he, ho, hu. Ka, ke, ki, ko, ku. La, le, li, lo, lu. Ma, me, mi, mo, mu. Na, ne, ni, no, nu. Pa, pe, pi, po, pu. And you decide whether you want to use the W or the V sound. Wa, we, wo, wu. Va, ve, vi, vo, vu. In the Hawaiian language, you're going to see markings. One of the first marking we're going to talk about is the kahako, or in English, the macron. And you can see it right there, the little line that's above that letter O. Luckily, it's in its own word. But the kahako is the elongation of the vowel, kahako versus kahako. Can you hear the difference? Kahako, kahako. With one, kahako. Without one, kahako. So it elongates the sound of the vowel, affecting the pronunciation, but it also changes the meaning of the word itself. For example, lolo versus lo. Can you hear the difference? Lo. I'm using an extreme example here to show you the point that it does change the meaning of the word, sometimes very dramatically, and can change the intention of what you were trying to say. So lolo is brain, or the thing we use to think with. Lolo is the absence of using that brain. So consider the pronunciation of all Hawaiian words when you're using the kahako. As a tip, as you are beginning to use the kahako in any of your emails, Word documents, PowerPoint presentations, you can simply find them in symbols. When you go to symbols, you'll have to scroll through the symbols to find the right one. And as you can see there in the row, recently used symbols, I do use them often. There are other shortcuts and other tools, but it's just simply a word symbol, and you can copy and paste that into your Excel documents, PowerPoints, and again, or your emails. The second marking in the Hawaiian language is the okina, and is a consonant in the Hawaiian language. The okina, or in English, is the glottal stop, and it's a break-in sound between the two vowels. It's used only in front of vowels or between vowels, glottal stop. The okina, again, a consonant in the Hawaiian language. Keep in mind when you're using an okina, that is backwards from an apostrophe. Yeah, so the apostrophe faces one way, the okina faces the other. So you might want to take some time, pause this screen and spend a little more time reading it. But again, the okina on the left, the apostrophe on the right. There is a difference when we are using them to help denote what we're trying to express and say in the Hawaiian language. Now, as we're talking about the Hawaiian language, it's funny to bring up the fact that the word Hawaiian is actually an English word to describe something from Hawaii. It's not even a Hawaiian word. So we specifically branch off into when you're referring to people, yeah, not everybody is Hawaiian. Yeah, Hawaiian refers to people of native Hawaiian ancestry. So if you live and are raised in Hawaii but don't have ancestry here, you're considered kama'aina for sure, or a local. But you're not necessarily Hawaiian in that sense. Like if you're from Texas or from California, you'd be referred to as a Texan or a Californian. Hawaii is very different in that sense. We do refer Hawaiian when it comes to plants and animals and things that are native and from this place. So just keep in mind the usage of the word Hawaiian. Okay, back to it. And as a side note, we wouldn't put the okina in the word Hawaiian because it's not a Hawaiian word. So the Hawaii would have an okina, the word Hawaiian would not. So now let's practice with these okina. So here we have a list of words, syllables. Some are actually words. But again, this is what we use in the Hawaiian language immersion schools. And so we're going to practice together, thinking about the sound that our mouths make when we say the a, e, o, u. Is everyone ready? Together. Ha'a, he'e, hi'i, ho'o, hu'u. Ka'a, ke'e, ki'i, ko'o, ku'u. La'a, le'e, li'i, lo'o, lu'u. Ma'a, me'e, mi'i, mo'o, mu'u. Na'a, ne'e, ni'i, no'o, nu'u. Pa'a, pe'e, pi'i, po'o, pu'u. And again, choose the V or W sound, whichever you prefer. Va'a, ve'e, vi'i, vo'o, vu'u. Wa'a, we'e, wi'i, wo'o, wu'u. Here are some fun choice examples, again showing off the difference a word can be when using and or not using the okina. Extreme examples: li'a, the heart's desire. Li'a, no okina, the egg of head lice or dauku. Li'a, li'a. Do you hear the difference? Li'a, li'a. So don't forget to use the okina when you're trying to tell someone just how much you love them. Next example. Onauna, fragrant. Ona, tipsy or drunk. Do you hear the difference? Onauna, ona. Onauna, ona. Onauna, fragrant. Yeah, something smells beautiful, smells wonderful. Ona maybe does have its own kind of fragrance, but here's a better example. Good idea to go to work. Onauna, not a good idea to show up to work. Ona. Now let's take a minute and using some of the tools that we've used, how would we pronounce this word? Lanai. What do you think the word lanai means? Well, the word lanai with no markings, no okina, no kahako, means a sore back. My back is lanai. Now add the kahako to the word, lanai. Do you hear the difference? Lanai. Now we have an idea what you think lanai meant originally. Lanai is porch, patio, or balcony. Lanai. Now we add an okina to the word. Lanai. What does that mean? Can you hear the difference? Lanai, lanai. Now we're talking about an island. So when you're using Hawaiian words, whether they be in writing or pronunciation, please consider the usage of the diacritical markings or the kahako and okina, because did you mean sore back, patio, or island? An excellent resource that you should consider bookmarking on your computer is the online Hawaiian language dictionary, vehevehe.org. Vehevehe simply means dictionary. And when you click on vehevehe.org, the entire page is Ōlelo Hawai, is in the Hawaiian language. So you may want to consider looking for the little English translation in the top right-hand corner. See it there? Click on English to help translate the page. Now that the page is all in English, I want to give you some tips for the use of this online tool. Let's say we're going to use the word vai or wai, which is a Hawaiian word most frequently used. When you translate that word, you see it means water. And you're going to see lots of different variations of that word. So water, vai, the first translation that pops up, is fresh. But when we look a little over, the second translation is kai. Did you mean salt or fresh water? So take a moment to look up the definition of the words when you are trying to translate words into English. Make sure the usage is appropriate. We see this favorite Hawaiian proverb, all knowledge is not taught in the same school. So this next section is something I would like to encourage you to join us in doing. These next policies and procedures have been adopted by the Hawaii Tourism Authority, the HVCB, and all of our contractors. These are tools to help you better utilize the Hawaiian language, and again, our goal of seeking consistency. All right, Hawaiian usage guidelines. Some of this good for in the office, some of this is good in your daily life. So at the Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau, and once again, the family of Hawaii Tourism Authority contractors, we used all the diacriticals in the Hawaiian language when we're in print. So if it's a Word document, if it's a PDF, a PowerPoint, etc., we do use them. If it's in an email or online, we don't necessarily use, we don't use them because it can oftentimes trip up the server. It can sometimes look like a square or question mark when it comes out on the other end, with the one exception of banner ads. We do use them in banner ads because banner ads are static, and we encourage you to do the same. Spelling, reduplicated words. What are reduplicated words? These are words that are used we see them here, lau lau, lomi lomi, mahi mahi, where it's the same word sort of twice, if you will, but it's always one word. So we would never put a space, we would never put a hyphen. So you see a few examples there of the usage in the column there where they're wrong, and the middle where they're correct. And so reduplicated words are always used as one. Capitalization. How would we capitalize Hawaiian words? Well, basically, you would do the same as you would in English. So here we have a sentence, a perfect example. Appreciate you coming, mahalo for your time, or we greet you with the warmest aloha. Why is the M in mahalo capitalized when we wouldn't capitalize the T in thank you? Yeah, so there we go. So we bring it down lowercase, and so apply the Hawaiian language as you would the English when it comes to the capitalization of Hawaiian words. Now, italicizing, this is something you don't necessarily have to do. This is something that we do to highlight and showcase that there is a different word in the sentence that's not English. So again, use the same sentences. Appreciate your coming, mahalo for your time. We appreciate your warmest, we greet you with the warmest aloha. And so we see the Hawaiian words that are italicized so that people see that they are a different word in a good way. And now we would not capitalize them at the beginning of headers, yeah? So if it's a place name or people's names, we leave them alone. Now place names. This is a very interesting one, place names. In certain Hawaiian language dictionaries, place names are treated a little bit differently. So in this regard, Mauna Kea, for example, we see there at the bottom, the example we're using. In some dictionaries, it's one word, in others, it's two. Napali is the same example, but we've decided, again, this is strictly for consistency and a rule that we use in-house. We just make it all one word. Yeah, it's just easier for anybody, for our clients and our guests to understand them. Why is this word two and this one's not? So for consistency, we always make them one word. Now here's another screen you're going to want to perhaps pause, yeah, and here's a bunch of different, this is from our brand guidelines, the Hawaii Visitor and Convention Bureau brand guidelines, a section on language and spelling. You might want to pause this. You can see the different things there and take your time as you read through that. Carrying on, pluralization of Hawaiian words. There's technically no S really for pluralizing in the Hawaiian language. So leis, keikis, luau's, and you notice I didn't even add the diacriticals because that's not really a Hawaiian word. But we don't have an S in the Hawaiian language when it comes to pluralization. So how would you then pluralize a Hawaiian word? Well, you need to apply that in the English. So here's a great example. When you go to the store, please pick up several lei mahalo. So in that instance, we would know that the word several indicates that it's more than one lei. So instead of adding an S to the word lei, all we need to do is add an English word to help make it plural. Now here are a few examples that we can use in the Hawaiian language. Phrases. Aloha e kainoa. When you're greeting somebody, you might consider using their name. Aloha e keoki. Aloha e kaiulani. Yeah, addressing somebody by their first name. Aloha e Paul. Aloha e Sharon. Yeah, great way to incorporate a greeting in the traditional way. And then if you're just talking with one person, between two people, aloha mai kaua e. Kaua indicates between two people, between you and I, versus aloha kako. Aloha mai kako. We're referring now to many people, including the speaker. Another greeting, velina. Velina me ki aloha, greeting with regards. And now certain times of the day. It's okay to greet people with just aloha, but if you're being very specific, aloha kakahiaka. Good morning. Aloha kakahiaka. Yeah, practice these phrases together. Aloha avakea. Aloha avakea is a little earlier in the afternoon, so it's more of a good day, yeah? So like lunchtime, noontime, that's why we have the time there, versus aloha awinala. Aloha awinala refers to more the afternoon. And aloha ahiahi. Aloha ahiahi means good evening or good night. A few other phrases for practice. Aloha, e komo mai, come inside. Or e kipa mai, come visit. Again, e komo mai, e kipa mai. Come again, yeah, come again. E hele ho mai no, e hele ho mai no. Mahalo is thanks or thank you. Mahalo nui, yeah, it's a much greater thanks, much thanks. And mahalo nui loa, thank you very much, or thanks very much. Mahalo piha is a way to wholeheartedly show gratitude to somebody. Mahalo palena ole, gratitude beyond measure, and ahui ho, until we meet again, or in this case, ahui ho kaua, when saying it to one person, or ahui ho kako, when saying it to many. Now, the giving of Hawaiian names, this is something that comes up often when people want to give a name to a business, a name to a dog, or pet, excuse me, a name to a child, a name to a bus, a name to an airplane, a name to various things in our industry perhaps. And we need to pause and think about the giving of these Hawaiian names. Sometimes when we're with a group of people, when we're leading a familiarization tour, when we're on a tour of our own, if you will, or dealing with people, people ask, what's my Hawaiian name? Well, we're not in the practice of giving out Hawaiian names because Hawaiian names are a gift. And so, I'll just read this with you. Please be mindful that the giving of a Hawaiian name should not be taken lightly. This should only be done by those knowledgeable in Ōlelo Hawai or the Hawaiian language and protocols surrounding the practice. So in a nutshell, unless you know how to give a Hawaiian name, it's highly recommended that you don't. And again, when in doubt, simply ask. If you're not sure, ask those around you and they'd be happy to help you. Yeah, when in doubt, always look for resources to ask. What are those resources? Well, we've talked about one already. Wehewehe.org is the Hawaiian language online resource, the Hawaiian language dictionary. We also have the Hawaii Tourism Authority Ma'i Toolkit, and I really think it's a great way for you to learn more about the history of these islands by spending some time and downloading the Ma'i Toolkit as a PDF on your computer and share it with your colleagues. And just as a little side note, and I had a little hand in helping with this, there's an app on your phone that you can download called Duolingo. They have hundreds of different languages, but 2 indigenous languages to these United States, Navajo and Hawaiian, were just recently added. And with a classmate of mine from high school, I was able to have a little bit of assistance and influence in the Duolingo app, excuse me. And please note that I do use this app every day to keep my Hawaiian language as up to date as possible. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. My name once again is Kainoa Daines with the Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau, and it's such a pleasure being able to spend a little bit of time with you and share the little bit that I know about the Hawaiian language. Now it's time for a quiz. How many letters are in the Hawaiian language? 7, 12, 26, or 14? What does the okina or glottal stop do to a word? Breaks the sound of the vowels, changes the meaning of the word, only appears in front of and between vowels, or all of the above? What year did the missionaries arrive in Hawaii? 1893, 1776, 1820, or 1959? What does the kahako or makron do to a word? Elongates the sound of the vowel, creates a silent vowel, changes the meaning of the word, or options 1 and 3? What does lanai translate to in English? What does lanai translate to in English? Sore back, porch and balcony, a Hawaiian island, or a casual greeting? The Hawaiian language is not an official language of Hawaii. True or false? How is the letter S used in the Hawaiian language? To pluralize words? It's not used at all, only used by elders, or between vowels. Who introduced Christianity to Hawaii? Captain James Cook, Sanford B. Dole, Henry Opukaha'ia, or Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalanianaole? Which website is the Hawaiian Language Dictionary? hawaiianlanguage.org, OleloHawaii.com, LearnHawaiian.com, or wehewehe.org? What does ahui ho translate to in the English language? Until we sleep again, until we tweet again, until we eat again, or until we meet again?
On behalf of the Hawaiian Islands, mahalo for spending time with us. Hopefully you've taken away the importance and significance of the indigenous culture of Hawaii and have accepted the kuleana to present it respectfully, accurately, and always with the best intentions. Mahalo.